Hey guys, if you ever go out artifact hunting or metal detecting, sometimes we get skunked. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, man, I wish I could just see what I'm walking across the top of, because you know you are. Well, we don't have a machine that can do that, not necessarily. So sometimes, to satisfy that curiosity, you just got to dig a hole.
Before you go digging anywhere, you need to check your state laws. Some states allow digging on private land, others don't. Then you need to get landowner permission and always stop if human remains are encountered.
As a metal detectorist, well, I dig a lot of holes, but you can tell this isn't the normal hole. It's a lot bigger. I'm trying for something about 4 foot by 4 foot. And I've started by just removing the surface dirt. Now from this point, it's going to go a lot slower because that's what I'm using to excavate. And I'm not really digging with it as much as I am just scraping. Just a little bit of the surface at a time, working my way down, maybe even in sections inside of this 4 foot by 4 foot square. And then ultimately I'll take the whole thing down, noting things like change of color in the soil, really closely examining every little piece of rock that comes out, and some other little clues that we're looking for. This is a really slow process, so I had a lot of footage for this video. I'm going to narrate my way through it and cut a lot of the video, so hopefully y'all aren't getting put to sleep, and who knows, you just go dig a hole, sometimes you find something pretty cool. Well, little pieces of rock like that, of course, I'm checking every single one of them, but I'm looking for even smaller things, like that little black dot. That's charcoal. And we'll talk more about why that's important in just a few minutes. So, predominantly in my area, quartz was the stone of choice for making artifacts. So, that's just a rock right there, but I see a lot of quartz flaking in this hole and the next one that I'm going to dig. And I pay especially close attention to those things now. That's not a broken artifact at all, because I'm looking for signs of knapping, and all I see there are just natural edges. So that was something driven off of a larger piece of stone in the process of making a stone tool. Sometimes little things like that were used for scrapers, but sometimes you really just can't tell. Alright guys, I've got down to a different color. And I went ahead and took just this one corner down till I got a color change just to see if I would get one. So now I've got to take the rest of this area down, and that's probably going to be a tomorrow thing, although I may take this corner out this evening. And so far I've got some debitage, quartz flaking, but nothing else super interesting, but artifact nonetheless. This might be fire rock, cracked fire rock. It tends to get that reddish color, but I'm not certain on that, but it kind of resembles it, but I've not seen much of that. A fire cracked rock or fire altered rock, well, that's usually associated with cooking fires, and so the Native Americans would dig a small pit and line it with rock. They would burn a fire in that pit on top of the rock, which heated the rocks. In the process of being heated, sometimes those rocks had moisture in it, and they would crack or pop. Another thing that the natives often did would be to heat rocks, especially pieces of rock like this. that maybe weren't very porous. This is a piece of really worn river rock, very smooth. And that reddish color, I've often wondered if that actually didn't come from being in a fire. I'm not sure on that. But these smooth rocks like this would be heated and then dropped into a pot or anything that contained water to boil the water or to cook, a stew. And so sometimes a superheated rock dropping in liquid, that would be enough to make them fracture and pop. I'm not seeing nearly enough of this stuff to make me think that I'm relatively close to a fire pit, but this sort of stuff would have littered the ground of any campsite that Native Americans inhabited. It would be pretty much everywhere, and it's not surprising to run across it even when you're just blind digging. So this is all predominantly quartz flaking that came out of that first test pit, and it's not uncommon at all campsites to be covered with this stuff, and most of it's around this size, and that tells us a little story too. So these Native American artifacts, they started out as very big rocks and they had to be worked down, and that process started at a quarry site, maybe where there was an outcropping of the right material. They would break these pieces of rocks up and get them to a more manageable size, then transport them back to camp, where from that point they would form them at the camp into their stone artifacts, and that left much smaller flakes. You just don't find a lot of real big material laying around camps. It's this size and much smaller than this, probably hundreds of flakes smaller than this that I didn't even bother picking up. So this would be flakes that were used off of what was called preforms, and they were just working it down to size. And then once they had their artifacts, well, they would get dull, and so they would also spend time resharpening, reflaking, and that made those much smaller quartz flakes that we find, but it would be everywhere. Now, of all the rocks that came out of the hole, this alone had a couple interesting features. And not everybody agrees with this theory. I've had some naysayers, and hey, that's all right. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I hold to it. So I'll show you the pile of rock that came out, just general rock, and this alone had a couple interesting features. It's got a couple spots of wear, where the natural pitting, which is what you're looking at kind of right there, natural pitting of the surface of the stone is worn down. And you can kind of tell it in the sunlight by the way that the sun reflects. And you see right there how the sun reflects off the end of that rock and not so much right off of the face of it. Watch again, right in that area. See the reflection? It's because that's worn. That's worn very smooth. And it's also worn in one other spot. So what were they doing with this? I don't know. They were grinding something. Maybe they were smoothing a hide with it. Really don't know. But I believe that is use wear. And so I kept this rock aside. It was the only rock that had those features. And man, there was a lot of rock that came out of this hole. I want you to look what just popped up right there in the corner. Oh my goodness. I hope it's whole. So we are down about 4 inches. Like I said, a lot of rock, more charcoal, but we still haven't even hit that color change yet. But let's take a look at this thing. Oh my gosh, that is finally made. Oh, please be there. Oh no, that moved way too easy. Sorry. Oh man, it's gonna be broke. Here we go. It's been laying here all this time. Oh, look at, golly. Dadgummit. That is a beautiful, quartz blade or point. Wow, that would have been so pretty. Kind of got that pink, peachy rose quartz hue to it. My goodness. All right. Well, let's hope there's something even more interesting as we go down deeper and get that color change. Sometimes you get a real good surprise when you look real close at your artifacts. Now, for years, I have noticed something showing up on predominantly my quartz artifacts. You see those little black dots to the left side of the artifact? And this black dot right down here at the base? I promise you that's not dirt. This has been washed and, lightly washed and scrubbed. There's still dirt on this side, but that dark piece right there, that's not dirt. It's all the same material. Like I said, I've noticed it on other artifacts. And I had an idea that it was not in any way part of a rock. Here you see some more of it on this other quartz blade. But I had to reach out to an archaeologist friend because I didn't want to just postulate blindly. And I asked him, do you think that could be resin left over from the hafting process? The archaeologist told me I needed to look at it under a microscope and look for a few features, and so I did. And I saw exactly what I was looking for. So, old resin, what in the world is that? Well, it's pine sap mixed with some beeswax. Sometimes a little charcoal was added to that, and it was used as a glue, and it would basically help seat the artifact onto a handle or a arrow shaft. And then the artifact would be bound with something like sinew in a crosshatch pattern. And then that resin would actually be smeared over the whole surface of all the sinew to waterproof it and protect it. And that old resin, sometimes it hangs around on your artifacts, especially, I think, these quartz ones. They're more porous, and I think they just held the resin better. So that was kind of a mystery solved and kind of a cool thing that I look for now when I'm hunting artifacts. Do I see any resin on it? A couple other things that I'm looking for as I go down. One is charcoal, and the other is called an archaeological feature. Now you're going to see both right here in these next few clips. The first thing that I want to show you is, see this dark stain? Well, the soil around it's much lighter, but in a couple areas, once you've got all the dirt removed, the dirt is noticeably darker. That's called a feature. All that means is that something back in the ancient days disturbed the surface of the dirt. Now, that could be a tree root, that could be a mouse burrow, it could be something like a post hole, it could be a fire pit. Anytime something dug into the dirt, created a bowl or a dish or a hole, that hole would ultimately be filled over time with the darker topsoil. So when you expose that lighter colored lower layer and you see a darker stain that continues to go down, you know that something disturbed the earth there. Now archaeologists, they know what disturbed the earth. But I kind of have to guess, but what I find in conjunction with these features is charcoal. It's right there at the same level. So that tells me there was human activity. Now, charcoal, yes, the forest burns sometimes without the help of man. But when you have these archaeological features and then all of a sudden a lot of charcoal starts popping up, well, you got to think of camp life where they had cook fires going all the time. Charcoal got spread around pretty much everywhere. This particular feature, I don't know if you can, I think you can see it. It's a very large feature. The ground around it's that lighter color, and then right in the center, and I kind of shelved the dirt a little bit to show you that darker feature continues on down into the ground. Something was there. Now, archaeologists, if they exposed a whole lot of the ground, maybe you could see that it was a post hole, or And if it was a post hole and you expose enough of them, well, all of a sudden you have the shape of a building or a wall of some kind. It can tell you a whole lot. Well, I don't know enough about it. All I know is enough to know that's a feature of some sort. And actually, I decided to dig down and chase this feature, see how deep it went. And it went really pretty deep. But it's something that I'm learning to look for as I do this process, and it's always kind of intriguing. If you think about a hole being dug in the ground and then the topsoil filling in, what's interesting is that sometimes you can find things like pottery or charcoal or even stone artifacts down inside these features where they have kind of slipped off and fallen down in the hole and been buried. And you kind of got to pay attention to a feature, because if you're trying to use the layers of earth to date the materials that you're finding, well, a feature can kind of throw you off because it's a hole. So something that would naturally sit higher in the earth level has slipped off down in a hole and gotten buried much deeper. But that dark stain right there tees you off. Yeah, something broke the ground here. We have unnatural layers of dirt here. Well, guys, that is it for my little test pit there. And I know this video is a little bit slower paced than mine normally are, but I hope you enjoyed it. This, for me, I really enjoyed that process. It's not always about how much you find. It's about what you learn in the process. And for me, that was a learning process. I enjoyed it. I don't know. Maybe it takes a little bit more of a nerd to enjoy that, but I hope some of you did. And I hope you learned something. Maybe the next time you're out there digging the ground, or maybe somebody's running an excavator, or, well, maybe you'll look a little bit closer in the dirt and find that there is a story lying there after all. All right, guys. Hope to be back real soon. Maybe some metal detecting, probably some more artifacts. Thanks for watching.